It's about to get crazy. It's about to go down. It's about to get crazy. It's gonna be loud. This is our house. We do what we wanna. We'll blow the roof up. Everybody's coming. It's about to get crazy. It's about to go down. It's about to go down.
Here we go. And 3, 2,
4, 8,
1.
6, 7.
Green light. Welcome, folks, to the Gritty Podcast. I am here today with my friend Casey Harbertson.
Hello, Brian.
Hello, Casey. We just got back from about a week, a little under a week, of elk hunting in the great public lands of the West. And
All they have to offer.
yeah, and we were out there hunting with Corey Jacobsen and Donnie Drake from Elk 101, 10-time world elk calling champion or something like that.
I'd never heard of him before, actually, personally.
Yeah. He's kind of,
I'd heard of Donnie.
yeah.
Donnie's a man.
So
Corey was okay, though.
yeah, he's all right. We actually had an incredible hunt. We want to talk about that today on today's podcast. So that's what we're going to do. For those that are watching, we're wearing the Conquer Hunger t-shirts today.
Operation Conquer Hunger.
And why the white though?
I got mad at my guys because I saw them designing these shirts on white, and I said, guys, and by my guys, I mean our incredibly creative team.
Yes.
I said, guys, white gets dirty.
Yeah,
And
there's
so,
some dirt on this nipple.
That's what I mean.
right here, and I haven't even worn
We
it.
put these on 3 minutes ago, and
Yeah.
they're already filthy. No, I said, like orange, yellow, blue, like something like that would look really great and get less dirty. I think they just want to show that we're doing some hard work or something.
Yeah.
Something. And then
It is kind of a working man's white shirt, sort of.
Yeah, but I really still would have looked like blue or green
Well, it's white, Casey, so deal with it.
or red. Wouldn't red have been nice?
I like red.
That's why I said
There's a
red.
couple red shirts, and I wear it all the time.
Yeah, you were the only one that bought them, so that's why we discontinued them.
That's why I want some gritty red shirts. That way I can just wear my own.
Nobody will buy them.
I don't care. It's funny. I don't realize how much I wear the same shirt over and over again.
Until you start looking back at pictures.
Yeah, and until other people start pointing it out.
And what's really annoying is the messages that we get that are like, hey, when's that shirt that Gritty's wearing coming out? And it's like, we discontinued that 2.5 years ago. I'm dead serious. I have the same blue shirt, and the only time I wear it is at the Total Archery Challenge because I have the same problem. People are like, when are you gonna launch that shirt? And it's like, guys, we discontinued this shirt forever ago.
I know. That's why I have two, and I keep them both in good condition. One I work out in, and one I just keep for, wearing on occasion. So let's get started, man.
Yeah.
Before we do that, I just want to make a plug for the Conquer Hunger thing. For those that don't know about it, since today is Operation Conquer Hunger, downstairs at the headquarters here at Mountain Ops. Give us a little rundown real quick.
Okay, real quick. So what Operation Conquer Hunger is, it's an initiative that Trevor came up with. Trevor Farnes is Jordan and I's partner on Mountain Ops. And what it is every order that you purchase at Mountain Ops, we donate a meal to a starving child. We started this in February of, I believe it was 2015 or 2016, and we are very close to donating almost 1 million meals to date.
Yeah.
Our goal is by November to hit 1 million meals. But as we've done this initiative, we've fed a lot of starving kids in Asia, in Africa, in the U.S., and we found that even just within a few miles of our headquarters, there are thousands and thousands of starving kids that go to school every single morning. And sorry to get a little emotional, but they even go home and don't even get to eat during the weekends. And we live in an incredibly affluent area.
Yeah.
And And so what's happening today is we're creating what's called pantry packs. And these are packs that will be donated to the schools, that those schools that have these kids that don't have the ability to eat. This food will be donated to them that they can go home that day with food. Either because their parents can't provide it, or maybe their parents don't put as much of a emphasis on that meal for their children. Maybe they're buying cigarettes, or maybe they're buying a cell phone plan or something like that, and neglecting their children's nutrition. So we wanted to step in because we feel blessed with the success that we've received, and Trevor has probably one of the biggest hearts that I've ever seen. To bless these kids here in our local area that are actually starving. And it's hard to believe that that is actually possible, but it happens every single day. So sorry to get emotional, but it's something that's pretty awesome to be a part of.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So, by the way, how can people participate in this? How does it work?
With what's going on today, or just our overall? Both. So today we've kind of got it locked up. We've actually got some pretty incredible companies. Do you want to read the companies that are on the back of the shirt? These are the ones that are actually physically coming today to participate.
Black Ovis, Sportsman's Warehouse, Agile Supply Chain, Crispy, Hoyt, Shields, at Centers West, Hush, Wild Arrow. Yeah.
So all of these companies will have a representative here helping to create these pantry packs. We've purchased over 10,000 pounds of food that will actually be, like I said, kind of combined together into these pantry packs that will be handed out to these kids as needed. And so all of these companies are coming to help to put together. But thanks to our wonderful Mountain Ops family and customers, all that money is being donated from Mountain Ops. So when you make a purchase at Mountain Ops, it's a good portion of that is either going to our Operation Conservation, our Operation Conquer Hunger, or to be able to help and do different things that we feel like we want to do with the blessings that we've received of being a successful company.
Yeah.
So just ordering at mountainops.com is a great way of being able to
support.
Whether you buy a sticker, whether you buy a supplement, doesn't matter. We're going to feed a starving child with your order. So
it's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. So, elk hunting in the West here. So how do you want to approach this? So should we just dive in? Like, we drove up to a place. We'll just keep it, general.
Yeah.
It was either, Idaho, Wyoming, or Montana, or Colorado, or, some western state.
It was west of the eastern border of Colorado.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so, all those states offer great elk hunting opportunities. Many just over the counter. Some states you can get two elk tags.
Yep.
Over the counter. I had an awesome trip I already explained with Ben and my friend Chris Conacher. So on this particular trip, I got to go with you and Corey Jacobsen and Donnie Drake, along with cameraman David DeAustin.
That's right. The professor. And we also brought on,
we also had Tommy, our hunt winner, hunt winner, who's never killed an elk yet. He won.
Elk 101 and Mountain Ops last year did a hunt promotion where you could win a hunt from us and be able to hunt with us. Mm-hmm. And the guy who won was an awesome dude by the name of Tommy that was from College Station, Texas.
Yeah.
And he was a 65-year-old former dentist.
Yeah.
That has hunted elk, I think, 9 or 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And has never killed an elk. And so it was our goal, even though we each had individual goals of filling our tags, we all wanted Tommy to succeed.
Yeah.
And so we tried to put Tommy in a slam dunk type scenario, having, I don't know, what'd you say, 9 or 10 time World Elk Calling Championship there at his side.
Yep.
And in a place where it is very, very populous with elk.
Yeah, target-rich
should be a target-rich environment, both private and public land opportunities.
Mm-hmm. In fact, the public land as well is supposed to be landlocked by private. So to get to it, you can get in through public, but the private access is supposed to give a huge advantage.
Mm-hmm. So we put together this game plan last year.
Now, Tommy was supposed to be on the Montana elk hunt that
you and
Aaron Snyder and I went on. That was just mad chaos with bulls
Did
screaming.
you show him any of those videos?
Oh yeah.
Oh, that's
yeah.
where we saw it in the wound.
Tommy was like, oh, I had to, because, Tommy was supposed to go on that hunt, but due to some confusion, he ended up with a cow tag instead of a bull tag.
That was one thing I was going to say is you got to make sure you're reading rules and regs and really understanding what tag it is that you're purchasing. Mm-hmm. Tommy, unfortunately, just got online, saw elk, bought elk. It was the wrong tag. He bought a cow elk tag, went to go on. It was like the next day or even a few hours later, and all the elk combo tags, which are for the bull elk,
We're gone.
And so we had to pivot and put
This
his
is Montana.
hunt. Yeah, this was Montana last year. If you guys haven't seen the Gritty Open season on YouTube, go check it out. Go watch the elk ops video in Montana.
We're floating the canal in like for the farming canal behind the ag fields in little rafts, Watermaster rafts. We get out, we belly crawl to the hay bale blinds. There's 600 elk all around screaming. I heard elk sounds I've never heard before in my life.
It was incredible.
That experience was phenomenal. So you're basically this year, because Tommy wasn't able to go on that hunt, this year's goal was to set up a similar hunt where Tommy could get kind of slam dunk opportunity. When we went 3 out of 4 tagged out on that hunt, I was the one that did not. I shot an elk in Colorado the week before. On that actual hunt, I passed up on a lot of bulls because when am I going to get a chance to hunt bulls of that caliber that we were seeing? So
very often.
I was holding out for one of those giants, and I was ready to go home without an elk. I was okay with that, and it was an elk experience I'll never forget. Jordan shot his first bull, cried like a baby. That's all in the video.
Which somebody came and gave him tissues yesterday. Isaac Olimon from Easton. Did you see that?
Yeah.
That was awesome.
I was here. He's like, I got something for you, Jordan.
I only saw it on Instagram because I had to leave, but I was laughing so hard.
Brought Jordan some tissues. So that was a killer hunt.
And when we do these hunts, like when we give away these hunts, that's kind of the opportunity that we want because we literally have no idea if it's going to be a 25 fit, like let's go crush public land, hunter,
or a 75-year-old dude that doesn't really know how to hunt
or has never elk hunted or exactly. And so we try and couple with a gear package. So Tommy won an awesome gear package and we really wanted to try and load up this slam dunk experience. And I don't want to jump to conclusions that we were fed a bed of lies, but it was anything but what we had experienced in Montana last year. Like it wasn't elk loaded up.
It wasn't a target-rich environment.
No, it turned into your typical public land with public land battles, public land confrontation, needing to do extreme amounts of elevation, lots of miles on the boots. And it's something that like, poor old Tommy was not prepared for.
Physically. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And not really what the goal was anyway.
No,
the private land access was supposed to be pretty great, but it turned out there were no elk on the private land. In the end though, I mean, it's still a great hunt for a fit guy willing to hike, that it's a great over the counter elk hunting opportunity out west.
Yep.
So let's talk about that a little bit because, Ben and Chris and I, we called in bulls. We got our opportunities. We came close. No one actually launched an arrow on that hunt. I did all the calling pretty much and hung back trying to help Chris and Ben get an opportunity. Ben had bulls at 40 yards. He had bulls at 70 yards. Usually though, the shot opportunity wasn't great. And so he didn't take those shots. And we had like, I think if people listen to that podcast, we had maybe, we had an opportunity once a day for, where we got in close to bulls for about 3 days out of the 6. And, it was fun. Bulls were screaming. They were talking. We were having some action. The rut wasn't quite that amped up. So you and I go back to a spot similar. We go back in there with Tommy. This time there's some public land access or private land access, but there's really no elk on the private.
Yeah, our goal was to really help Tommy to be able to have a slam dunk experience on the private, and then you, Corey, and I were going to shift gears and really attack that public because we were going to be given access that nobody could get. Like you said, it was landlocked, right?
Yeah.
The only way that you could get it was you basically had to come in 8 miles from a trailhead.
Like 5.
Was it 5? Okay.
4 or 5 miles, but it was extreme elevation, up and down, up and down. It was it's grueling hiking. And so getting in there is actually not that tough. But for most guys, the idea of packing out an elk from that area when you have like 300 pounds of meat now to pull out, that's daunting. That's discouraging. That keeps most people out of this type of area unless they have that private land access pass to get to the public that's landlocked.
Yeah.
Right. You can get in there from an alternate route, but man, if you have to pack an elk out of there, you're committed to a multi-day grueling hike with heavy loads. So yeah, most guys aren't going to go in there because they're just not. But more and more, man, I'm seeing fit, healthy, hardworking dudes in the backcountry.
Well, and that's what's really cool is to see that places that probably, humans haven't necessarily ventured in as frequently are getting hit more and more and more and more because people are taking things more serious, like their fishing, like their fitness. They're taking their hunting more serious. They're not just like, all right, let's drive around on a 4-wheeler. When we see something off the road, let's just shoot that. Like they're actually accessing areas that are miles and miles and miles off a road.
Yeah.
And then creating their own trail. Like back there when we were where we were at, there wasn't like this nice trail that took you all the way that 5 miles into this public area. Mm-hmm. It was literally a few game trails and then just get on your maps, your GPS or whatever, and mark where you came in because there wasn't, we even saw a lot of guys that were making trails with the flagging tape.
Yep.
You don't have any trails in there. So it's cool to see that people are doing, kind of what we preach, which is getting after it.
Yep. As far as elk go, so tell me, and those that are listening, what was the standout, the coolest experience you had this past week?
Actually, the coolest experience I had was probably, so on the first day, Corey almost killed Tommy, because Corey took Tommy into the private. Quickly found out there was no elk in the private, so he's like, let's just start hiking and see what we can find. He took Tommy all the way from 6,500 to 9,000 feet, and Tommy lives at, I think he said 57 feet elevation or something like that. The elevation about killed Tommy. So day 2, we had to kind of switch things up where Tommy stayed with David and
take a day off.
He could take a day off to recover. And so Donnie, Corey, you and myself were able to go and just crush it.
Yeah.
And so I was super excited about that.
Yeah, me too, because I've never hunted with Corey Jacobsen.
Yep.
I wanted to observe what he does, how he calls, how this whole thing works. So
literally the first 25 minutes of the hunt was probably, it was everything that you would ever want to experience with Corey Jacobsen. Corey bugles, bull sounds off. I look over at you and I'm like, Brian, you got this. You're on the, you're shooter. So you and Donnie take off. I said, I'm going to film Corey. And as soon as Corey kind of lets another bugle off to, this bull was probably about 500 yards away from what we figured. Corey bugles again to kind of get a reference of where this bull's at. And this bull is literally on top of us.
Yeah.
So you and Donnie have to drop down, get a quick setup. Corey and I are literally trying to run back another 75 yards.
Yeah, Corey's like, he's here.
Oh, and so if you see the film,
there was no time to set up. He went from 500 yards away to 100 yards in like minutes.
Yeah.
While we were like, okay, well,
dude, it was like
we need
seconds.
to figure out where to go, and then there he is.
It was so fast because you heard this little scream, and then when Corey called again, I would say it seemed like it was almost back to back.
Yeah.
I'd have to go back, but it was like
He just was charging.
He was so excited. So when that bull came in, and he was a good bull, nice 6-point, Corey and I, retreated back. We got set up. Corey started getting, his cow calls going and getting this bull really ramped up. You could hear him screaming through the trees. Didn't know what was going on with you and Donnie, but all of a sudden this bull pops out on the hillside upwind of us instead of downwind. And I think that kind of threw all of us for a loop.
Well, when Donnie and I scrambled, like you guys were dropping back, we were just trying to get behind a tree. It's just something, or in front of a tree, some place where we're not just standing right there in the wide open.
Yeah.
And there's a major game trail that popped down through this thicket, but this thicket was like old, like pines and stuff. And there's pine needles and the ground is covered in cones.
Yep.
And then there's one major dirt game trail that cuts through the middle of it, but it's pretty dense. And it's hard so the gamble was he's going to walk right through that game trail and we're going to shoot him off the game trail. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't want to commit to the game trail completely because I don't really know. So I like to stand where I have like options.
Yep.
But there wasn't really time to find that spot. And Donnie's like, right here. So we just moved to this spot. And we didn't really have time to set up before the bull just came around the corner. And then the first thing the bull did when he came around the corner, he's probably 45 yards from us. He looked straight at us. He just pops into view over the hill, and then boom, he looks right at us. And he's on the game trail. Looks like he's going to walk right down the game trail. But we're maybe 15 yards off that trail. I would have liked to have been maybe 30 yards off that trail, but we didn't have time.
Yeah.
So now the bull's staring at us, and now it's just a matter of sitting still, and Corey, the bull stops, he stares for a while, and he knows something's up. He's looking at me and Donnie, like right at us.
Well, and what's cool is, so I'm only 55 yards from the bull, because the bull kind of split the two groups. Mm-hmm. He kept coming to Corey. And so we're about 55 yards from this bull, and I can just see his head completely wrapped back looking at you guys, and Corey, is whispering to me, and I was planning on filming Corey calling in for you, and I had to drop the camera.
No time.
Sorry if I broke the lens, and I actually had to knock an arrow because we saw the bull coming right
straight
into
to
Corey,
yep.
which Corey called a bull into 20 yards the day before that he could have shot, but he was trying to get Tommy a bull.
Yeah.
And so it was interesting because I'm sitting here watching this, and I'm like, I'm really curious what Corey's going to do, because this bull is pinned on Brian and Donnie. Obviously, he knows something's down there because Corey's letting off a few chirps over here, over there, and he doesn't really care. Well, then I see Corey start to kind of like ramp it up a little bit, like get a little bit more aggressive. Now he's throwing out a bugle, which is like pulling the bull's head towards us. And then he makes another like 5 yards, 15 feet or so, 3 to 5 yards step. And then he kind of wraps back and looks back at you guys. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, man, if this thing comes another 10 feet, I've got a perfect window. I can shoot him.
And I didn't really, I was like, get the shot, Brian, get, this is a great, the bull's coming in. So now it's like, it's time to make lemonade out of lemons, like find a way. But when that bull came around the corner, he was on the trail and he pinned us the first time. He just didn't feel comfortable with us. Yeah. And so he cut up and got off that game trail. Well, and then what he did is he crossed in the open, in the upper grass, in the wide open. But we're in a dense tree thicket now. And I got to shoot through a bunch of trees to try to hit him, like a wall of trees. And so I'm like, I was like, dang it, but he was still coming in. So he would look at us, and then Corey would do a bugle. And what I remember, and I need to watch the video to recall it all, but what I remember is Corey doing like a couple of cow calls, like meow, 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 meow. So and then he would just turn his head and go start walking straight to Corey.
Yes.
And then he'd stop and look back at us, and then he'd seem somewhat concerned, like, I know I heard something and I saw something. And then Corey would make a few cow calls, and it would just be like short-term memory loss. Just
forget about what's going on down
that.
Here, go back.
And he'd walk a little bit, and then he'd stop and remember, wait, I think I heard something down there. He'd look right at us again. So, but it was great because having a caller that's skilled like that, Corey could tell the bull was hanging up. He could, he was trying to work it. So I take the focus off of me, off the shooter, and get it on him. And it worked. He did the right sounds and he did the right things to get the bull to look at him and ignore me. I mean, he saw or could tell we were not
Well,
right.
and that was the thing, is we roughly knew where you guys were, and we're like, they're well within range. And Corey said they should be within range of that bull. But that didn't mean that he was like, okay, I'm going to just
Be quiet now.
cut silence. Like
Right.
he kept, like, he knew, okay, if it's possible, he's blocked, he doesn't have a shot, like whatever, I'm going to try and move this bull even more. Worst case scenario, he actually drops into our lap. Casey shoots him.
In hindsight, I should have let him walk to you.
But you didn't even know that I was set up to shoot, though. That's the thing. We couldn't communicate that to one another, and that's where I wasn't even planning on shooting.
Yeah.
And so I checked my lanes, and I was like, okay, the only place that I would hate if he came was just off to my right, and there's a pine bough coming across, toward, kind of shooting down towards the ground. Everything else, I'm good up in the open, looking at the elevation that he's on. But at the end of the day, I was like, Brian's going to shoot this bull.
Yeah.
Like this, I'm not shooting this bull.
Well, when the bull came down, so I was like, okay, I got to get to full draw. Now he's 30, 35 yards from us. And so he's close.
Yeah.
But it's dense. And unfortunately, instead of coming down the middle of the game trail, he cut up and kept the trees between us. And, he was locked onto us. But nevertheless, I got to full draw when he walked behind a tree, because I didn't know for sure if he was going to cut down, stay up, like what he's going to do. So I got to full draw, and of course, that much movement stopped him, and he was staring down at me again as soon as he came around a tree. But at least now I'm at full draw.
I have a question, and I was going to ask you this on the trip, but I never did. Were you still wearing the T-shirt, or were you able to put your hoodie on? Like
I had the
face
hoodie
mask?
on.
You did have hoodie and face mask and everything on? Okay.
It was morning, so I hadn't.
You hadn't peeled it off yet?
I don't think so. No, I had a T-shirt on.
That's what I was going to say. I thought you had the
did.
T-shirt on, which I was like, crap, because we didn't even have time to really throw our stuff.
No, Corey was going 1 million miles an hour climbing that hill.
He's his organs are just a giant lung. That's all he has.
So
no heart, no guts, no intestine, just a giant lung.
It was a lot of hiking.
Yeah.
And so he was cruising up the hill. But anyway, the bull comes, and I get the full draw, but I got a lot of trees in my way, and he's staring at me, so I'm waiting for him. As soon as he goes behind another tree, I shifted my bow so it was pointed in his direction, and then he, of course, stops behind another tree, and he's staring, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting. Probably after about 2+ minutes, the bull steps into an opening, and I have to shoot in that opening or not at all, because once he passes that opening, I can't shoot him anymore. There's more trees and stuff. And as it is, I'm still shooting through some brush, but it looks like I can get the arrow through. Corey is down the hill. And that's where I'm like, I probably should have just let the bull walk to you and let you shoot it. It didn't occur to me at the moment. And I'm at full draw at 35 yards or so. And he's staring at me. Well, he walks into that opening that I've got. But now there's no way for me to get a clear shot without walking. So I'm moving, blatantly moving in his presence. And he's just staring at me as I shift around, step to the side, move below this branch. I'm checking my cam, make sure I'm all clean with the branches and stuff. And then I settled that pin best I could, put the 30 yards on him. And then I shot, and I hit him low and back. And at the time, I didn't know where I hit him. I don't know if it deflected or what happened, but it was not the shot I wanted. And being at full draw for that long, I mean, in hindsight, which is always 20/20, I would have, knowing where he went now, I probably would have moved a whole bunch first and then drawn my bow at the last. But I didn't know if he was going to walk and be 10 yards away, and there's no way I was going to get drawn at that point. Mm-hmm. So I got drawn as soon as I could, because he's going to be 10 yards. So I was like, if I don't get drawn while he's at 40 and he's at 10, I'm
never
screwed.
Going to be able to draw.
Yeah.
And that was what was weird, and we experienced this at least 4 different times, where what you would typically think elk would do is you've got your caller, you've got your hunter, and you've got the elk, and you've kind of got this line drawn between you. and the wind's blowing downhill, you would assume, because 9 times out of 10,
circle to get your wind.
the bull's going to come down to check your wind. 4 times, bulls went above us.
Yeah.
To see us,
which
not to smell us.
Which Corey said was so different. The open country that we were hunting in, he said that he thought that the bulls were just accustomed to having visibility.
Yep.
And they like to stay high above.
Every single one of them went high.
Yep.
And looked as opposed to went low and checked wind. Yep. I don't even know. Did we ever get busted by the wind?
No, not that I know of.
The only time was that night when the 2 cows came below and our wind blew into them. They went back.
Mm-hmm. But even that bull, we worked for like an hour.
Yeah, it didn't affect the bull. It was just a couple of the cows. But it was really interesting that we kind of kept experiencing that where they were looking.
You get to know an area and you get to know what the elk do, where they like to go, and you have a huge advantage when you know an area and, and their behavior, their tendencies. Had I known that, we'd have been ready for him to cross high.
Oh yeah,
and stay in that open. It just kept happening over and over again. You could call the elk in from above you to come down, but you really had a hard time calling elk to come up to you.
Yeah.
They didn't like that.
Mm-hmm.
So like Corey has mentioned, getting elk on the same latitude as you is good because elevation, because they'll come straight across. And then having an elk above you kind of come down, that would work. But calling a bull up to you is a little more challenging. But anyway, he called that bull in. I took the shot, hit him low. He bounced like 5 or 6 yards and stood there. Mm-hmm. So I knew he was about 40 and I was pulling an arrow off my quiver. Somehow my arrow got stuck in tree branches, my quiver, and then as I was reaching for the arrow, the whole quiver came apart and popped off, and my arrows are loose, and now I'm pulling like an arrow off a broken quiver, and then I'm getting it loaded. All that stuff took time, and I don't know how I got tangled up in the tree. It just was that dense.
Yeah, you're not paying attention.
And that's where I didn't like that initial setup where we stood. I don't like to be that close to trees, and I don't like to be standing on those pine cones. But again, we didn't have time.
You didn't have a choice. I mean, that's literally it. Happened so fast that we had to deal with what we were dealt. And
I got another arrow on, and he was 45 yards, and so I was, I was at full. I don't know if I drew my bow or not. I think I did draw my bow back, but I just never got a.
He probably would have been. His butt was probably straight at you because he was perfectly broadside for me at that point.
He was broadside he was quartering away a number of times, and then his butt was straight to me.
And that's probably when he was just to my right in that pine bough that I talked about. Mm-hmm. He literally stood right there. There was 6 different lanes, and he stood in the one that I couldn't shoot at.
Yeah. No, I didn't have a great second shot. And honestly, I thought from the sound of the arrow,
it sounded good.
It sounded like I punched through him. So I was expecting him to sort of fall over, but I didn't make a good shot. And, we ended up tracking that bull 9 miles to a wallow. And then, we lost his trail in the mud because there's just so much mud there, and he wallowed and whatever that did. Later though, we went back the next morning, got back on his trail 300 yards from the wallow. David DeAustin was able to pick up his blood trail again, which he did that from little mud drops that he found that smelled like blood mixed with mud. Me and Casey were like, that's not, that could be any bull.
I remember so we fan out so that we can cover more ground. And David's like, hey guys, I got something. And this is after probably 45 minutes of looking. And so we walk over there and he's like, check this out. And I'm like, David, that's mud on a tree next to a wallow.
Right.
If you've never seen that before.
There's a lot of tracks all over.
And he's like, no, smell it. And I'm like, smells like mud, David. Well, taste it. Tastes like mud, David. I don't know. I think there's some blood in there. And I'm like, just let me know when you find blood. Because when you find blood, then
I'll be excited.
Then I'll know. So I head back down. because I'm taking the lower part of the bench that we're on, and probably about 15, not even that long, like 5 minutes later, he's like, hey, guys. And I'm like, is there blood? Like, I'm not hiking back up there unless there's blood. No response. So I'm like, fine, I'll just friggin' hike back up there, mud, and then blood right next to it. Like, could not deny it. And it's like, how did you do that, David? How were you so disciplined that you didn't just look at that mud and completely disregard it like we were?
Yeah, you didn't even see it. Like, there's mud everywhere.
Yeah.
But it was a distinct drip looking piece of mud.
Yes.
And then there was mud, like it looked like its leg he had drug his leg across the.
Well, then what was interesting is it's like, okay, well, what path did he take? And we start looking, and you can see this mud drag and blood on
you could
every
see his
log.
trail.
You could literally watch for about 50 yards where he went. And David had helped me. I had hit a bull last year, and David came down with a group to help recover him. And the trail was like 75 yards of blood and then ended. And I had hit him in the high shoulder and just a straight meat shot. Mm-hmm. And so it was about 75 yards of blood and nothing. David, kind of similar experience, about 100 yards from last blood, found one more drop of blood that was like kind of put us back in his direction. Mm-hmm. And I was like, dude, like, are you literally a bloodhound? Like,
yeah, I was blown away. Like the spots he would see. So long story short, 300 yards from the wallow, he is back on the blood trail. And then we follow that another couple hundred yards to where the bull beds. So the bull bed's down. But the bed, unfortunately, didn't have hardly any, it had no blood in it, really. And then at some point, it was obvious that he had gotten up and left, and there was no blood. And we searched and searched, because there was pretty good blood from the wallow to the bed. But once he laid there for a while, it clotted. And we didn't arrive on the wallow till 8 hours after we shot the bull. So if he was dying of septic shock or something like that from a low hit, if it was low enough, I mean, it's really hard to tell. And the camera doesn't capture a very good image of it. It's hard to tell. It's really hard to tell if that shot's fatal or not fatal.
It enters in through the leg, but never gave us any indication of what portion that it came out. Mm-hmm. Through that, it's, because you've got the camera angle that you're taking into consideration, which is different than the shot angle. But the crazy thing was, and the comment I made to you is, dude, those Valkyries must be incredibly sharp, because we keep finding blood, and it's like, it's muscle blood. It's not, lung blood.
Yeah, it's not guts.
It's not even brisket blood. It's nothing like that. It's like, but he just keeps bleeding. He just keeps dropping these drops of blood. Like, what is going on? And it was probably because he just kept moving and moving. He never bedded in the 9 miles that we followed him. He never stopped and actually laid down until after the wallow, we found that bed.
And he was with a bunch of other elk. You could see all the tracks and stuff, and he was hanging out with the herd. And so he didn't behave like an animal that was dying.
Well, so you shot him at, if I remember right, it was around 7,300 feet. Mm-hmm. And we were at 9,000 feet in no time. And then at 9,000 feet is kind of where the tree line was that he skirted. So we kind of started traversing the mountain at 9,000.
And it was just a constant drip, 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 drip of blood. But it was nothing. It was like muscle blood. Yep. That's what it
was like getting a bloody nose. I can't remember if it was you or who it was that said that. It was kind of like getting a bloody nose.
And the thing is like a lot of times people will see blood and they'll be like, this thing's got to be dying. It's crazy how much blood it takes for like an elk to lose in order for it to be fatal.
Yeah.
Or even to mess up their day. It takes a lot of blood. And that little constant drip, even though it was dripping for 9 miles, once he laid down, it just indicated that it clotted. And usually muscle blood will clot. Like, they'll just sit still, it'll clot right away. But that bull, I think, he just beelined it with his cows and his herd up to those 9 miles in less than 45 minutes, probably.
Probably, easily.
And so then he bedded and then clotted.
Yeah.
Usually if they're hit pretty bad, they would bed, or if they're not motivated, he'd have bedded right after you shot him, somewhere within 200 or 300 yards. We didn't push him.
Well, and that was the crazy thing too, is so what we had planned was, you had hit him. We followed his blood to a certain point and we said, okay, let's mark this blood, because he was kind of heading, it looked like he was heading down into a river bottom.
Yep.
And so okay, he's going for water, must be like a gut hit or something. Let's let him go down to the river bottom. Let's actually head in this direction. And because we got a few more bugles and we know there's some elk over here. So we start heading over in that direction. We look down and there's blood. And so, okay, let's mark this blood. This is the same bull. Not sure why he came out of the riverbed, but let's mark this and let's let him go and sit. We can come back and let's go over here. And then we ran into blood there. Mm-hmm. It's like we couldn't get away from him. Mm-mm. And that was the weird thing, because it's like everything that told all of us what this bull should be doing, he wasn't doing. It's like, okay, hit animal does this. But it was like I bet he didn't even know he was freaking hit.
No,
he was just doing his normal path of
he didn't care.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say. We never saw birds. We looked 2 days basically. Never any signs that it was fatal, that he died. Of course, an animal could die weeks later.
Yeah.
You never want to make a bad shot. And I'm not sure what happened. I really don't know. And that's the frustrating thing when things like this happen, is sometimes it's just an unsolved mystery. I mean, part of me was just dying to find this bull so I could see where the entry and exit was and what we were dealing with. What was it all about? And there's a few times where I thought we were going to find it, because it just 9 miles and we just tracked it. And then 300 yards from the bed, we find where he bedded. And I'm like, I really thought at some point, he's just going to get water and then he's going to go lay down and he'll be dead right there. No,
never happened.
I just don't think it was. I just don't know.
Yeah. And there'll always be that big question mark there. And it was really, really interesting, because that next morning, so we would have given him all night.
Mm-hmm. We never pushed him.
No, never pushed him. So you shot him at 7:00 in the morning.
Yep.
We're going in 7:00 the next day is about when we were getting back into the area that he was.
And honestly, if it was a gut shot, I would expect, after 9 miles of walking, he'd feel so sick and crappy. And after bedding, he wouldn't get back up again.
No. Oh no. And that's where, so when David found the blood and we found 3 or 4 different drops. So we kind of knew the path he was taking. We got open our map and we started looking, pulling up some of the, topo lines, and we're like, okay, so there's a bedding area here. Here's this bench. We both pointed, and this is about 150 yards away. And we said, he is going to bed right here.
Yeah.
And what's crazy is that he took that trail right to within 5 feet of where we pointed. We both knew where this bull was going, just based off the topography and everything. Mm-hmm. And we got there, and that's where his bed was. And then the big question mark was, okay, so this bull laid here, bedded here. We no longer have blood. We no longer have tracks. Where did he go? And we pulled the map back up, and we're like, he could be anywhere. Mm-hmm. He could be anywhere. If he feels good, he's going this way. If he feels bad, he's going this way. If he met up with this other group of elk, he went this way. So we checked all those different ways, and it was like, we literally are trying to find a needle in a haystack right now. This is near impossible. Anything that would make sense to us, we checked based off of previous.
We gridded afterward, and circles and grids.
I mean, we would smell elk. We would go in that direction. We would check that whole area. We did everything that we possibly physically could to try and recover that bull. And at the end of the day, there was nothing to help us out to be able to really truly find out which way he went.
For me, it was definitely a highlight to be there with Corey and to have Corey call in a bull like that. And he made it look so easy. It just was irritating. Well,
and that's what was, so that was the only call-in experience that you and I had. Corey called 7 different bulls into Tommy, our hunt winner, the first day like that.
Yep.
Tommy was
not. And so I got on the bull that very next morning.
Yeah.
And those elk were in prime position at that day with Tommy, 7 bulls. They were just susceptible to the calls. Yep. And then we called in the one bull and I shot it. And then after that, it was like the elk switched.
Yeah.
They were kind of like, you know what? There's a bunch of people here. We're not falling for this anymore. Corey called a bull for you for about an hour before dark. And that bull just wouldn't commit. I mean, he was so close, but just would not.
There was a couple times he got ramped up. And it was cool to hear him chuckle. It was cool to hear him,
hear Corey.
Crepe trees and Corey's sequence of how he would talk back and forth to him, some of the glunking he would do and different things to get him amped up. But that was the problem for me is that happened to me 3 different times where we would get bulls fired up and they would not commit and come in. And so we would have to do these advancements. We'd have to do these charges. We'd have to try and get really creative of, okay, if he's not coming in, we're getting wind right and we're going straight into his bed or wherever it is that he's hanging
and
out.
I asked Corey, in a number of those situations, like, how do you get that shot? And he's like, well, the shooter has to just push in.
Yeah.
You have to just push in on that bull and try to get a shot. You're probably not going to pull that bull in.
Yeah.
If it's not going to break loose, it's not going to break loose. And so, and you can, especially if they have cows, or you can call and push in. The caller and the shooter can kind of pressure the bull until he forces him into a confrontation. But like, we knew this bull was by himself. He was just a younger bull, and the way he bugled, and Corey could tell how old that he was young. And so trying to tempt him to get him to come in was tough. And so in that case, as Corey pressured him with the calls and got closer to the bull just kind of backed up and just kept that buffer all the time. It was still awesome to see, and Corey would rake and that bull would rake, and Corey would challenge and that bull would challenge, and back and forth. But when he pushed real hard, that bull would be like, I'm just a little guy. I'm just pretending right now, and he'd back off. But that was really cool. And then the next couple of days, I was calling a lot for you, and you got within 70 yards, within 100 yards of elk, and just could not get.
They just couldn't commit, and this area is so open that as you are advancing, you have to make strategic advancements. In some cases, it was dodging cows' eyes. They were off feeding, bulls over here, but cows are over here.
And we should mention, this is a public land hunt, and on the day I was there, the day Corey had those 7 bulls, the next day, the 2 days we called in bulls for you, every setup we were in, we had other hunters crash.
Oh my gosh, yeah, and that was the interesting thing is, so we physically called in more hunters than we did elk.
Yeah.
Like, duped these hunters to think they were going to score big time. Like one example was, it was the last or second to last day. We're getting these bulls fired up in this canyon. We're making our game plan of how we want to start attacking these things and going after them. And all of a sudden we hear all this rock sliding and craziness. And I'm like, man, what is that? Is that antlers? Like, I thought it was like antlers, like 2 bulls are fighting. And we keep hearing this like scree just falling everywhere. And then we were up at 9,000 feet where it's kind of the tree line and the scree. And we finally make our advancement to these bulls. We go get set up. I get set up about 40 yards in front of you. You're around the back of this hillside. Got a nice game trail where these elk are going to come in, or if they come up above, I'm going to get a nice shot. You start your sequence. You start cow calling, and all of a sudden, David's like, 50 yards, 50 yards, 50 yards. And so I'm like, sweet, dude. We got elk. Like, we literally came right on top of these elk. So we're super stoked. You're ramped up. You're like, yes, man, we did this perfect. And then all of a sudden, Dave's like, it's a freaking hunter. It's a freaking hunter. Mm-hmm. And like 1 hour before that, we were hot on a bull that I had at 112 yards that wouldn't commit because same thing. He came up above.
He's looking
the wind. He's looking in. He wants to see us. He's barking at us. He wants to see something. The one day we don't bring the decoy, right?
Yeah, I wonder how that would have panned out.
Oh, dude, I honestly believe that if David would have had his heads up, which he had carried the entire time except for that morning, if he would have just flashed that, I think that bull was so ramped up, he would have come in at that point, especially once we started hitting him hard with those easy estrus calls.
Yeah.
And, I mean, that's all he wanted. He just wanted some type of confirmation. And I was hiding behind a tree at that point, because he had come up over this ridge as I was making an advancement towards him closer, because he wasn't coming in, so I had to kind of come to him. And as I'm starting to come around this tree, he comes over top, so I have to stop, and he barks.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay. So I'm like sticking my elbow out there, trying to like show movement, and then I'm scraping the ground and doing a couple cow calls so that he thinks it's a cow, and another bark. And I'm like, I don't have anything I can show you, bro. Like, there's nothing on me that's brown or that looks elky at all. I'm straight up camoed out, and I guess I could have or actually, no, I didn't. I had dropped my pack at that point. And so I really think if we would have had something to show him, some type of decoy, just something, he would have committed more. But then we went and got up. He was heading to his bed. We knew where they were bedding. We started moving, making our way in there. We got the same elevation as him. And we're like, okay, so let's, we had let out kind of our last little bugle, heard where he was. And we're like, all right, let's sneak around now. Let's just go in.
You're on his elevation. We were moving in on this bull, and he had just bugled maybe 10 minutes earlier. We knew right where he was. We had been there the night before. We knew where he was. So we got the wind right, and we were on his elevation, and we were moving in very slowly, going to shoot this bull. And the next thing we know, some dude comes walking through, wind wrong, right where the bull was at. He had just walked straight to the bull and blew him out.
Yeah. And I don't think, and I don't know because we weren't hunting with these guys, but we saw it multiple times where guys were getting set up and the different things that guys were doing. I don't think people understand how critical the wind is.
Well, I think it's both ways. So this is what I noticed with Corey Jacobsen. Corey pays attention to the wind, but he's also really bold about the wind. Maybe I'm overly cautious about the wind, but there were times where I think I've heard Corey say this on Hunt Talk or Elk Talk or whatever with Randy Newberg on their podcast, and he mentioned how critical the wind is and the thermals and all of that, but also wind in your face is not the best calling setup, actually, because the elk don't want to come in to that.
Yeah.
But where your wind is blowing right past the elk, the elk is actually downwind, but to the right? Mm-hmm. That bull feels like the wind is in his face more. Those kind of setups where it's just skirting the line, or where those elk are more comfortable to come in, or where they have cover. There's a few times I feel like we made a mistake trying to call that bull into the open.
Meadow,
but all we needed was him to take 10 yards and come into the open. And the sun was still pretty low. I mean, it was early. And all we needed for him was to walk out of the tree line and look, and you would have had like a 50-yard shot.
Yep.
And so I didn't need him to cross the meadow. I just needed him to come out of the thicket, just peek out the thicket, and he was in range. But they don't want to come out into the open. Setting up where there was a lot more trees and it was thicker seemed to bring the bulls in a lot closer. Mm-hmm. And then, having a situation where the wind is just going to cheat you. Like that bull on the slope that you were after, every now and then the wind would kind of blow up in their direction. But that bull never smelled you. Mm-mm. The cows smelled you, but the bull never did. But it was so close. If he just went a little bit south, he was going to get you. But he wasn't quite south enough to win the shooter, to smell you. And that situation where you're gambling, we had actually run into a guy that was set up on the meadow right where that bull was at the same time. And I was calling, and he came over to me, and he's like, "What the hell are you doing here?" And I'm like, "Well, we're working this bull." And he's like, "I've been working this bull." And so we were having a conversation. He was not very happy. And I'm like, "Hey, I don't know what to say. It's public land." We both were after the same bull. It happened to us multiple times.
Yeah.
Every setup almost. We had other hunters show up and start calling and bugling and coming in. That's how it is. But he was like, "Your wind is wrong. Your wind is wrong. You scared all the elk." And I'm like, actually, Casey's 50 yards from the elk, and he's about to kill this bull.
Yeah.
But the wind was close. It was cutting it close.
Yeah, and that was the thing is we knew with that setup, the in particular setup you're talking about, like we definitely had to gamble because we knew where the elk were going to come down in one of two spots, and we had a 50-50 chance. That wind was blowing left to right. It wasn't blowing up and down the hill. And so I gambled that elk was going to come to my right, even though the wind is blowing to my right. But if he did, I had 4 shooting lanes that I would be able to call stop him in those shooting lanes.
Yeah, if he came to scent check you, he was gonna.
He would have to come through those lanes.
Yeah, it was real tough though. We could not quite get those bulls to come in, and Corey struggled with the same thing.
I mean, I'm no expert, but I just think a lot of these guys we were talking to, they'd been on the mountain for 20 plus days.
Yeah.
I think these bulls have caught these other guys multiple times that they're like, hey, fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice, whatever that saying is, but the thing is those bulls would not show themselves. Those bulls would not commit. We got really lucky on yours, Corey, with what we experienced, Corey experienced with Tommy, that Corey was able to call on those 7 bulls that day. But as we progressed further and down the week, those bulls became more and more and more hesitant, and we kept running into more and more.
Yeah, we had
hunters.
this one toward the end, the day before we left. We have like 4 bulls screaming in these three different draws, and they're going off. And we had been on those bulls. We had created that morning. We had got there before daylight to the spot where we knew the bulls were feeding, and then going and then heading to the bedding area. We got there early, and the bulls were out and about, and they were screaming all over. We set up, we started calling, and we created just a frenzy of elk activity until there were bulls screaming. I almost shot a bull as well. They were just going nuts all around us. Well, that's good. That's a good thing, because amid that chaos, bulls, there's real bulls screaming in all these directions, and cows, and then elk do stupid things. The problem is all that noise and all that screaming and all that ramping up of sexual tension also brings in like 5 different hunters from all over that were just running to get to where they are hearing the elk on the mountainside.
And we were doing all the work to get them amped, and all these other hunters were being smart, staying quiet, and moving in quiet.
Yeah, and moving in quiet. Didn't make a peep, but were using the excitement and listening to us call for them to come in and shoot a bull. It's frustrating, but so we heard some elk. After that setup got crashed by 2 hunters, we were like, then the elk went quiet. We went around, to where the next spot was, where we know they like to go. And there were 3 or 4 bulls screaming from those hills, and it was just game on. So we abandoned that section over there, and we moved in real quick. And I knew the area. I knew where to go, 'cause I'd called some elk in before from that spot. We charge in there. And then we set up, and it's beautiful. Things are perfect. We have bulls in 2 draws. We start calling and breaking some branches, and the wind's perfect. And really, I used the same setup before and had a bull come into 40. So I was excited to do this. And we're calling, we're doing our thing, and we're like, this is going to be sweet. This is pretty good. And we can hear those bulls calling back. And next thing you know, you and David DeAuster are like, right there. And you're hunkering down, like, dude, there's a bull coming. It's like 40 yards. I mean, that's all your visibility. I knew if you saw the movement, you saw something, then it was like on, like Donkey Kong. And then about 3 minutes later, you're like, it's a hunter. And we had called in this hunter.
He was the one we could hear running through the scree to us.
Yes. And so he had, he's like, sorry, man, you guys sounded real, and they were some fit dudes, man. They were hiking these mountains. They were at 10,000 feet. They were chasing elk. They're hardcore dudes.
They knew what they were doing. They had bivvy camped into there, and they were, basically sitting on the elk and waiting for them, going after them that morning. One of them had separated and went another probably 1,000 feet of elevation to go after another herd that went up almost to the top of the mountain. And
all those draws that were ahead of us and all the draws that were behind us on this mountain range were full of other hunters.
Yep.
And the area's not that big.
No.
There's only one canyon here, one canyon here, one canyon here. It's like, And it just was, it's like we could not get away from other hunters doing their thing. And that happens on public land. That's just how it is. Corey kept saying, it's National Public Lands Day. Like every time we ran into a hunter, he'd just bring that up. And that's the thing with hunting public land. It's not like we weren't into elk though, in spite of it. And it was still an adventure and it was fun. But like Corey said, it's really tough to call in elk, reliably in areas like this where they're heavily pressured. Yeah. And it's interesting because there are guys that these were areas where traditionally guys wouldn't hike into that they're hiking into.
Yeah. And I just think it's, you can look at it one of two ways. You can sit there and you can be upset and you can be pissed and you can, yell at the other hunters. But I think about that guy that we ran into the last day and he was from North Dakota. And I was just like, man, this is my backyard. I just take this for granted. But you've committed so much time, money. You've driven so far to be able to come here and hunt.
Kudos.
Kudos to you. Like the fact of what you guys did, you bivvied out, you did this, you're in. Like when you kill this bull and you have to pack him out, like hopefully that's something you never forget and maybe you never want to come back in here.
Yeah.
But it is awesome to see all these hunters. I actually didn't meet any hunters from the state that we were in or from the state that we are from.
Yep.
Everybody was literally east of the Colorado border.
Yep.
And that's pretty cool to see.
That was incredible. There were some guys that were more local and they were jerks. Absolute jerks. Yeah,
that is. I didn't talk to them. You did.
I ran into a couple that were just absolute jerks.
Yeah.
Which, you're going to run into that, but for the most part, I'd say 8 out of 10 were just salt of the earth, awesome dudes that were like, it's public land. We're here to share it. Where are you going to head? How can we stay out of each other's hair? What are you going to do? What am I going to do? And we kind of just set up a plan and agreed to, work around that. And we wish each other's success, right?
Yeah.
Then you ran into the guys that were absolute just a-holes. They were just there. They acted like they own the elk, like they own the area that's their spot.
There was actually words that were said that was like, these are our elk.
Yeah.
And it's like, are they? Are they really? Can you please define that a little bit more? Like you grew these elk from babies and released them to kill them now?
Right. Like there was just some possessiveness, and when a guy puts a tent up in a spot, it's like, okay, now this is mine.
Yeah,
like now I can hunt
my claim.
all these ridges in this area is mine because my tent's here. And it's like our tent was there too.
Yeah, I understand frustrations. I really do because I get frustrated as well. But it kind of turns into. I mean,
when that one setup happened and the guy was going off. I'm like, well, I'll check with my guys and see if they'll back out. And I reach out to you and I'm like, there's another hunter and you're like, dude, I am in the thick of it.
Well, I knew too much because of how far. I mean, I'm literally looking at this bull at 71 yards and all of his vitals are blocked, and I'm sitting there on the phone with you like, okay, so I'll totally just back out right now. But I can tell you that where those guys are set up, I know too much. This bull is not leaving this bench.
Right.
I don't care how sexy they are. The only time they're coming down where he is when they're going to feed in like
at midnight.
6 hours.
Yeah.
So I can just back out and say, okay, you win, or I'm going to do.
You didn't do anything wrong. We didn't do anything wrong. We were hunting elk and we were in the moment and we moved in on the bull and we had hunted this bull 3 days in a row.
Yeah.
And so we didn't do anything wrong.
No.
It wasn't anything unethical or anything rude but I was like trying to be the bigger person and say, well, if we're not in this scenario, we'll back out. We'll go find some other elk. But then when you're like about to kill a bull and they're 200 yards away from even getting in the game, it's like, sorry,
just because you heard a bugle doesn't mean it's your elk.
Right.
Just because you have a trail cam pic of this bull doesn't mean he's your elk. Like,
and that's the issue that we got crashed over and over again. And that's just. part of what happens on public land.
And I think you need to expect that. I mean, that's every time I hunt public land, that's what I expect. And if you decide to come out here and hunt and expect otherwise, you're setting yourself up for failure in that sense. And I think you have two ways of looking at it. And this is how I look at all things in life. You can either focus on the problem, which is the other hunters, or you can focus on the solution, which is coming up with a game plan that either you have to work harder than these guys, work smarter than these guys, or maybe your solution is we go try and find other elk.
Well, and it seems to me, having hunted areas like Oregon where it's an over-the-counter, a lot of it's just an over-the-counter. There's no quotas. You can just buy as many tags. Anybody can come there and hunt. In states like that, or where there's no limitations at all, it can get really crowded. And it used to be that I could go into some backcountry and not run into anybody because no one's willing to go there. And perhaps my podcast and others have,
I told you this morning, you need to quit freaking talking about how awesome public land is and coming out west and hunting elk. You're filling too many tags of ambitious guys. But I say that facetiously.
It's definitely harder. Like Corey Jacobsen mentioned, it's harder to get to where you don't run into anybody anymore. You find a piece of backcountry, you're like, no one's insane enough to go back here, and then there's people back there. And I think, that goes to, when I was talking to the one guy that we ran into, the guy that was guy that was a real a-hole, he was like, how did you get back here? And I'm like, we hiked 7 miles. And he's like, well, where are you camped? And I'm like, we're camped 7 miles away. And he's like, well, how are you going to do that today? And I'm like, we hiked in 7 miles, we'll hike out 7 miles, and that's our day. And he's looking at me like I have two heads, like 14 miles at 9,000 feet, that's not physically possible. We did it every day. We did it all the time. And I think that we've sort of begun to destroy some of these limitations that people think they have in getting into places. It's like, it's just hiking.
Yeah. You have to wake up earlier. Like, he thought you came in on a four-wheeler, right? Didn't he ask you that? Mm-hmm. And it's like, did you hear my four-wheeler? No. Like, did you hear my boots? No. And so it's interesting because
and he was like, you can't call this elk. You can't call these elk. You can't call them. I'm like, actually, I watched Corey call this bull into 60 yards, and it stood in front of him for like 5 minutes. Unfortunately, Tommy from Texas, 60 yards is out of his effective range.
Yeah.
And so he just could just stand there and enjoy the view. But that bull was like looking at him, and he liked Corey. He liked whatever Corey was saying to him. And called him right off of that mountain, came right to him. So, he is a 10-time world elk calling champion, of course. But just because one guy can't do something, it's often hard for them to imagine that someone else can.
Yeah.
And so when someone looks at me and is like, there's no way you hiked 14 miles in this single day. And I'm like, sure it is.
Do you want me to show you my little
sure
fitness app? That
let me show
I can't fake this.
My tracks on X or whatever. It's like, and I think when people say that, they're like, you can't call elk. Corey hears that every time he goes out. The elk aren't talking. You can't call elk. You can't call elk in. You need to be quiet in this unit. It doesn't work. And then Corey goes out and calls in elk and kills them. And so, it all comes down to your skill set and what you're good at. And I think we've done a good job in general on educating people and letting them know and explaining to folks that these things are not impossible. These things can be done by the average guy.
Yeah.
That a little bit of fitness and a little bit of time, a little bit of energy, a little bit of shooting, a little bit of calling, and you can be out there doing it just like everybody else. It's not that tough. And we ran into a lot of people in the town that were from the East Coast, and it was awesome to see their passion and their excitement. They couldn't believe the vast tracts of public land that they could just go onto. And they couldn't believe that when they walked out on day one and bugled, that a bull actually responded and came right into their setup. They're like, oh my gosh, I'm addicted to elk hunting forever now. And I think sometimes it's hard for them to imagine that if they come out west and just pick a spot on a map that they're going to get into elk. Yeah. But literally, that's what happens.
You know, and I totally get the sense of ownership from the locals. But what I think is awesome is that the guys from Virginia, the guys from Florida, the guys from Georgia, Michigan, these different North places Dakota. That we met, these are their public lands as well. Mm-hmm. They have just as much. They have the exact same amount of ownership as that guy that lives in town but hunts these hills.
The thing that scares me is because you're absolutely right, and all these guys from the east are coming over and taking advantage of their public lands that they own. What bothers me is when the states are trying to assume ownership of all those public lands, which effectively would freeze out everyone who owns those lands today that come from the East Coast that are enjoying and partaking of that. They would get locked out or potentially locked out. You look at a resident tag is like $50, $30 for an elk tag. A non-resident can be as much as, $600-$700 for an elk tag. Why? Because one's a resident and one's not. The wildlife is owned by the state, not the federal government, not by the people of the United States. It's owned by the people of that state. Mm-hmm. If you were to make the public land system similar, now the public lands are not public to the entire nation. They're public to just the people in that state. And even then, the track record of how those lands are shared among the people is abysmal. And so I just reinforces to me how critical the public land system is and how important it is that it remains federally managed and not state.
Well, and not only that those who live in these states outside of the West that want to come hunt the West, your voice is just as important as somebody that lives here.
Exactly.
Because if you think, okay, I live in Virginia, but I can only really utilize this land 10 days a year when I go out for an elk hunt, you better fight for those 10 lands 10 days when they're under pressure or they're under scrutiny or under fire from legislatures and everybody else, because you can't just think that only us in Utah are going to do it for Utah, or those in Montana or those in Idaho are going to do it for their respective states. Like, we all need to work together.
And there are people in, like, let's say, like the state, a single state that are like, I would love it if it was just us and we could lock all the people out of it that are not part of our state. But the reality is it's just a slow road to privatization. Yep. If you go down that path, the track record, the statistics, the numbers, they just don't pan out. And it's just that slow road to privatization. And, that's a scary thing to me, because one thing I appreciate when I meet these guys from the East Coast is their profound level of appreciation for what we have.
Yeah.
They don't take it for granted. Because back there, they got to lease a little tiny piece of property and pay a whole bunch of money just so they can hunt some whitetails. Here, they come out west, and it's like, I can't believe the amount of land that is at my disposal. It's a king's inheritance, and they do not take it for granted. While the guys that seem to be locals and out west, it's just like, that's my land. Those are my elk. I mean, they just have this possessive attitude, like entitlement, and I find some of that East Coast those visitors so refreshing.
Yeah,
they're so grateful.
You know, one of the funny things that Tommy said as we were talking to Tommy, this is on like day 3 of the hunt, and I don't know if you heard him say this, but he was talking to one of his buddies, and his buddy was like, "Hey, check out this bull I shot." Were you there?
No.
So he showed him his picture, and it was like a 420-inch bull, and Tommy was like, "Where on earth did you shoot that?" Mm-hmm. And this was like in the middle of June or something. Mm-hmm. And he was like, "Oh, over there on the, like, whatever hill ranch, 20 miles away." And he's like, "Oh, that's a ranch bull?" It's like, "Yeah." He's like, "I didn't shoot anything on this trip, but that's more of a trophy to me than to go and drive to this ranch and to do that." The experience that I've had just being able to see elk, have elk called in, and the experience that he had was more valuable to him than shooting a 420-inch bull in a high fence ranch in Texas.
But here's one thing to consider, like a 3 or 4 point draw unit, or even 2 point draw elk unit, I have found, has been pretty phenomenal compared to an over-the-counter unit.
Yeah.
Because it just locks out that little bit of
Enough.
There's a quota and a percentage. It increases your hunt experience just a little bit better because it's managed, I think, a little bit better for quality of hunt. And that's one way you can sort of try to avoid some of this public land rat race,
Yeah.
apply for a hunt in these different states where it just takes a few points and you're in a better elk unit. And then the other thing is, as much as we talk about public land, there's a lot of private land hunt opportunities out there where you have a phenomenal experience for a couple $1,000s or a few $1,000s. And I've talked about this a few times, and I'd like to look into it more. But when you look at the amount of years it takes to, let's say, draw 10 or 15 years to draw a premium tag in, let's say, Arizona, and you buy the license each year, and then you do your $5 entry fee or whatever, and by the time you've done it, you've done your whole thing over 15 years. You've put in, $1,700 or something into the draw system. You can find some pretty decent public land or public landowner or private landowner tags for a couple $1,000s. I think it's getting harder and harder as I talk to Corey Jacobsen about it. Of course, those things are in demand, but it's one of those things where that's one way you can improve those. Sometimes you can hire an outfitter and get a drop camp. That can help with getting you more remote, but with my fitness and how my experience in the backcountry, I don't feel the need for that. I can I pretty much put myself anywhere I want without horses in a pack train. But all in all, it was definitely a public land race more than I've experienced in a number of years. There was a lot of people in this place, a lot.
Yeah.
And so I probably won't be going back anytime soon to that particular spot, that particular unit. I want to find something with just less people in it. And that said, it was still a great hunt.
No, it was.
You know what I mean? Like, even though you had all those obstacles and all that kind of stuff, I had my shot opportunity. I had my chance on a good 6x6 bull.
See, and I didn't even get the ability to draw back the entire time we were hunting, so I wouldn't even necessarily say that I had my opportunity.
Yeah.
But I probably love the hunt just as much as you did, and for me, it's not always about the kill. You think about how much you and I were able to learn from somebody like Corey. I felt like I was able to learn a lot from you as well. Don't know if you learned anything from me, probably not. But the thing is even just that brotherhood and camaraderie of hanging out together, sweating it out on the mountain, freezing it out that one day when that storm rolled in. Like, it's stuff like that I'll look back on, that I won't remember the missed opportunity or whatever. But
we talked about that. We want to do a 2.0 with Corey next year, like find another area and do an awesome hunt, because you and I didn't get to hunt with Corey, but really one day.
Yep.
And most of that day was spent tracking 9 miles.
It was really one morning, honestly.
Bull. Yeah.
That we hunted.
Yeah, it was like 20 minutes.
Yeah. Think of all we learned in 20 minutes.
Yeah, I know. 20 minutes and then 30 minutes that night on the way out when he was working your bull. That's probably when I learned the most, because he only made 2 bugles and my bull I shot was there. So I got to really see him work for about an hour, and I learned a lot. Some things that I learned from watching Corey were a few sounds that I don't employ very often. I picked up on a few vocalizations, and then timing on how he kind of worked that bull. And Corey was a little more subtle, a little more coy than I have been. I'm sort of sledgehammer the bulls with my calling a little bit. And I noticed Corey was a little more finesse and a little more like leaving a little more coy, and so I started to try that a little more. When I was calling for you, and And, it got the bulls going, man. Where before maybe I pushed too hard.
Yeah, they kind of got a little scared and started coming in quiet. Like they knew something was going on, figured it was elk, but they wanted that visual confirmation.
So playing a little more coy, having more gaps in calling where I go quiet for a while. I saw Corey do that a couple of times, which just sort of, I think, builds suspense for those elk. They're just like, dang it. Am I missing out? It's like fear of missing out, you know?
For reals, yeah.
They heard all this action. Now it's just quiet. They're like, what? And I think they're starting to like do this, you know, I'll put a little human, you know, thought into this, but it's like the bull's sitting there going, man, I should have gone down there. I should have gone down there. Now they're gone.
Why did I wait? Why was I hesitating?
Dang it. And then comes back again and is like, wait a minute.
I am not missing
out. I didn't miss out. Should I go? I'm going to go. I can't take it anymore. You know what I mean? It was like Corey really knew how to space that out and draw out the drama.
He's a tease.
He's a tease. Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And I was more like, it's happening now. Like XXX video, you know, get down here. It's it. And, he definitely teased better than I do. So, those are some things to walk away and practice a little bit. So, but the brotherhood, you know, Donnie and Corey are two of my favorite people.
They really are.
And to be able to spend time just in camp, talking and hanging out and visiting with guys of that caliber of not just elk hunters, but as people, is a blessing for sure. So
yeah,
I'm looking forward to the next time. And next time, you know, be great to hunt multiple days with Corey. And
well, that's the game plan. Is
you learn so much.
So 2.0 next year, we're going to find a spot. The four of us are going to go in. 4 of us will have tags, and we'll spend however many days it is that we can to, whether it's 5 days, 7 days, 10 days to that hunt where, you know, there is no restrictions, no limitations. Probably won't. Sorry, guys. No hunt winner will be able to come along. We're selfishly going to go and just crush this mountain because we had so much fun that one day that it was like, imagine what 5 days would be like.
Yeah.
So 2.0 next year will be pretty sweet. I'm stoked for that.
Yep.
I can't wait for Donnie's humor. That's the one thing that I don't think people know about Donnie is he's hilarious.
He is very funny. He extremely witty. You know, there's a still waters run deep kind of thing going on with Donnie Drake.
It's subtle, but it's deep.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah. Anyway, yep. My elk season's almost over. Archery elk. Yeah. I have a rifle elk hunt late season with Ryan Lampers. And I'm looking forward to that because I am. Especially if I don't tag out, I have 3 days with my buddy Dwayne the Rock Sessions, and we're going to head up to Montana.
Yeah.
And so I've got 3 more days to try my hand at elk with the bow, see if I can tag out. But if I can't, you know, it's rifle late season and we'll see what happens there.
Yeah.
So,
I've got Wyoming, or not Wyoming, I've got Montana next week with Jordan and Trevor. We're going up there, back up to the place where you and Aaron came with us last year, and we're
that
taking
place is phenomenal.
Couple different guys. So who knows if we'll be killing them out of the alfalfa fields or up in the hills, wherever they are, that's where we'll go. But, and then I'm putting together a hunt for that 3rd season, in Colorado as well. So we'll see. I just need some meat though.
I know.
I really want some meat.
I have some moose. I have a little bit of bear. You know, we pretty much have polished off the elk. And elk is that one animal that the kids and the wife and just that's what they want. They want elk meat. Mm-hmm. And so I did not deliver yet. But I was like, but honey, I shot a nice mule deer in Montana. And she's like, yeah, I don't care. I want some elk.
Don't want to eat that.
So, and it's funny, like the mule deer is delicious. It's just, especially, he was plowing the ag fields up there, but elk is elk, man. It's mild. Wow. It's sweet. It's got a great flavor to it. So, it's hard to beat, man.
I know. And I've got 10 pounds of burger left from 2 elk that I killed last year. So I need that much more to feed.
Yeah.
So we eat a lot.
Yeah.
Got a lot of mouths to feed at my house. So Montana and Colorado better be a little bit more successful on the side.
I hope I get it. I hope an elk with a bow is the goal. Like every year that is the hunt I wanted to capitalize on. But I said this before, there's just no elk hunt that's easy.
No.
They're not a gimme. Like elk they're tough.
They are. Yeah, they absolutely
Especially when you try to do public land, over the counter public land. It's, a lot of respect for those guys that get it done every single year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or every few years. It's kind of my track. I spent a lot of time helping other people, calling for other people. So it was really cool to have Corey call for me that day because I haven't had someone call for me in a long time. Like I used to Anthony, my buddy Anthony would call. He's a really good caller and he'll bring bulls in. Ben is all right. I have a few buddies that can call okay, but not like at the Corey caliber.
No.
Anthony's
World
right.
Championship.
Anthony's right there. Really good, and calling is a skill. It just is. It's not like, it's not like it's just something you just pick up.
Yeah. You think about how much time you spend shooting your bow.
Mm-hmm.
You probably have to spend just as much time with a diaphragm and a bugle.
Yeah.
And so that's actually one thing after watching Corey that I would say I'm lethal, not deadly with the call.
Yeah.
And I want to be deadly. And so that's one thing that before 2.0 next year, I want to be the one to call an elk in for Corey. That would be cool.
I feel like I got the elk sounds pretty good. What I lack is just, more along the lines of timing and cadence and, what to apply when and things like that. So, and that really comes from hunting and, learning from a mentor, and watching them do it. I learned a lot from Anthony. And then I learned a lot this weekend from watching Corey. And you can watch all the videos you want, but it's different when you're there.
When you are there and you actually kind of see how the scenario rolls out, you're like, that makes sense.
Yep.
It makes a lot of sense.
Yep. So, folks, I want to thank you all for listening to the Gritty Podcast. As always, we appreciate any reviews you can leave us on iTunes. People don't know this, but the podcast came off iTunes for like the last 4 weeks.
Is it back on?
I think it's going to be back on today.
Okay.
If you were subscribed to the podcast, then you didn't notice because it still came through your feed, but they took it off the iTunes registry because they didn't like the title convention and some of the descriptions and things like that. So they just shut it off. So I've been working with iTunes for over a month, trying to get the show republished in the iTunes registry. So if you subscribe through that, and if you've been looking for it, if you were we're giving away a Hoyt bow we're just since we launched that open season video series on YouTube. One of the things is if you sign up for our newsletter, which is at briancall.com, then you can win a Garmin InReach and a Kafaru backpack. And then actually the news, that's for leaving a review on iTunes. And then you win a Hoyt bow if you go and sign up for our newsletter. So we have both of those things going on still. The frustrating thing is for the last month you couldn't really leave a review on iTunes because of because they took it off the registry.
They just
never told us that they took it off.
And iTunes didn't tell us that they took it off. So we had to, it just kind of, people started to write in and say, I tried to subscribe and I couldn't find it, or I tried to leave a review and I couldn't do it. And so anyway, we've complied with the rules and gone through all the hoops and stuff. And so the show should be back today, actually. And today we're recording this on the 26th of September. So we should be all right. The show should be out by the time this goes up. Should be good. Anyway, but yeah, win at Hoyt Bow. Leave us a review on iTunes, and go and sign up for our newsletter. Win at Hoyt Bow, InReach, Kafaru Pack. They're all up for grabs. So go out there, leave us a review on iTunes, sign up for the newsletter. Go to briancall.com, watch all the gritty films that we produced for the open season event that we did over the past 5 weeks, and it was awesome. We got so much engagement. The video of Ben and Anthony hunting elk in Hell's Canyon, we're over 50,000 views on that. My goat hunt with Aaron Snyder, I think it's over 35,000 or something views on YouTube. Our elk ops
in Montana,
yeah, it's right up around 30,000 per video. There's 3 of them. The moose one of me and Aaron in British Columbia, that's surprisingly low. I guess around 30,000 views, but iTunes blocked, or YouTube blocked that as well.
Oh, did they really?
Yeah, they don't like the skinning in the meat and the blood.
In the thumbnail or just in the video?
In the video. In the video. They say the content's not suitable for most viewers. And
the moose one got shut down pretty hard too.
Yeah, so what happens is YouTube goes in and shuts down. Like normally if you're watching a video of a moose hunt, let's say, it'll pop up automatically. It'll promote your another moose hunting film. And in this case, what it does is they just they don't market it through the YouTube algorithms. They just kind of shut it down. So the only way you see it is if you're looking for it. Yeah. And so it's frustrating because to me, we know where our meat comes from.
I know.
Taking apart a moose, and seeing it's not graphic. It's not morbid. It's actually pretty interesting. And I try to make it as tasteful as possible, but I want people to see the connection between the hunt and the food, and that's really what it is. There is a connection here. Just to shoot it and then end the film like we shot a moose tells only a part of the story. Throwing it on the grill and eating it and showing that part of it as part of a film. I try to do that in most of my films. And then for YouTube to like block it all the time, it bothers me, but I also feel like it's important. So I leave it in. And I get a lot of comments from people saying they're glad it's there.
Yeah.
So
we're not ashamed of what we do.
No. But folks, go to briancall.com. And check out those films. Of all the things, I really appreciate it when people watch the films and are entertained by them and leave the comments. So appreciate that. And that's it. As always,
stay gritty.
Stay gritty.
Nice.
Gritty. Despite our ever-changing, ever-indignant world with its growing ignorance of and indifference to the ways of the wild, I remain a predator, pitying those who revel in artificiality and synthetic success while regarding me and my kind as relics of a time and place no longer valued or understood. I stalk a real world of dark wood and tall grass stirred by a restless wind blowing across sunlit water and beneath star-strewn sky. And on those occasions when I choose to kill, to claim some small part of nature's bounty for my own, I do so by choice, quickly, with the learned efficiency of a skilled hunter. Further, in my heart and mind, I know the truth and make no apologies for my actions or my place and time. Others around me may opt to eat only plants, nuts, and fruits. Still others may employ faceless strangers to procure their meats, their leather, their feathers, and all those niceties and necessities of life. Such is their right, of course, and I wish them well. All I ask in return is no one begrudge me, and all of us who may answer the primordial stirrings within our hunter souls, my right to do some of these things myself. What you just heard is a quote from M.R. James. We truly live in a world that is largely ignorant and indifferent to the ways of the wild. And although some regard us as relics of a time and place no longer valued or understood, we have the opportunity to change the way these people view the hunter and the hunt. We can share our experiences and nature's bounty with those who employ these faceless strangers. And by so doing, we make a difference, not just for ourselves, but for the wild animals in the wild places we care so deeply about. Never stop sharing your passion for hunting and the outdoors. Our wild animals and our wild places depend on it.
This is Ty Stubblefield, and you're listening to The Gritty Bowman.
Gritty Bowman.